Query string is an easiest way that you can be able to pre-fill some of the fields inside your form. Last week, we touched our base on this. In this video, we're going to get into the details on how to make the most of your forms in WP Forms. Welcome to WP Forms Africa. So for this, I will begin by creating a blank form that has the name and email. This form, I've named it a subscription form, simply because this is the kind of form that you'd want in your website to accept subscription. However, sometimes you'd want, after accepting the details from the subscribers, let's say you want to send them an ebook. And in order to do that, you want their subscription details, like the email and the name. Then you redirect them to another form where they should be able to simply download that particular form. So for this form, if we go to settings, then go to confirmation, then you say go to URL. We have this form already created. I've already created this form, that is the form pages form, which is actually this form, which has a name, email, and message. It is hard to use the query string to pass in these values dynamically, because for longer forms, you will need to sometimes pass in the manual values. For instance, if let's say we want to populate this email field right here, you'll simply come to the email advance, then go to the default value, then search for query string. As soon as you find the query string, you pass in the ID as email right there. Then if you come back to this one, you can come redirect, then show the page. And from show the page, you can pass in that value as a parameter. That is email equals to, then now you're supposed to pass in that value from the email. Let's say email is test@gmail.com and save it. So as soon as we preview this and submit, you'll notice this actually gets populated because it's actually passed as a URL parameter. But again, this has some limitation, especially if you're working with more than one form and you're supposed to populate all the values, which is the reason why in our guide, we mentioned that if you're looking to move more advanced query for WP Forms, we highly recommend enabling the prefill by URL. So what this would do, it will help you to build a query string. And if you would want to do that, it will actually be handy for us. So for this part, I'm going to focus on that. So I'll come back to this and I will remove these values, then go to the type should be go to a URL, and this is actually the URL. Now to touch base on how to enable the prefill, the first thing that you're supposed to do is on the second form that you'd want now to pass those values, what you're supposed to do is to enable something we call enable prefill by URL. To do that, you will simply need to go to the form builder, so WP, log into the backend, then go to all the forms, and for the form that are user details form, then go to settings, and from the settings, go to the general, then scroll down and enable this, enable prefill by URL, which is actually disabled by default. Sometimes you do find this is actually collapsed, that advanced settings is collapsed. What you're supposed to do is to click on this, which should expand, then you enable prefill by URL and save that. As soon as you've enabled prefill by URL, this actually gives you the next important thing. What you're supposed now to do is to build our prefill URL. To build our prefill URL, we have a guide on how to do that. This is actually how to assemble the URL. And this is actually the format of the URL. That is a HTTP test.com. Then you pass in this value, question mark, WPF, then 20_1 sub value that. What this means is that question mark and WPF marks the beginning of the query string for the prefill by URL. That is actually the format that WP Forms knows that you have begun. The 20 is the form ID, 1 is the field ID, sub field identifier is actually optional. This comes in handy if you're targeting fields which has the sub field, such as the address field, the name field, etc. Then the equal sign is actually to show the beginning of that value, then now you pass in equal to the value. So in simple terms, for example, we want to prefill the name field. So we're supposed to remove this value that we had. We're supposed not to prefill this name field using query string, using the prefill by URL. What we're supposed to do now is to build our URL. So our target form ID is 579. So you will simply begin with WPF prefix form ID, then underscore, we pass in the field ID value. For our case, we want to pass in the field ID 1. And in our case, because the name field has the format of first and the last, it means it is actually a nested field, or rather a composite field, having them first and the last format. So we will begin by passing the first format, then equals to, then inside here we can pass in another value. Let's say the first format is Mike, which is still not dynamic, but to understand how it goes. So Mike router test at gmail.com. So as soon as you submit, you will notice, similar to the query string, is actually that value is passed right here as into the first. But now the problem is you cannot be going back and editing for every user that submits, because at the end of the day, it's not maintainable. And this is actually where the dynamic values and SmartTag comes in handy. Before I mention about SmartTag, I will simply introduce us on how SmartTags work in WP. But next week, I will dedicate a whole video session to walk us through the SmartTag in WP Forms. So what SmartTag are in WP Forms? So SmartTag in WP Forms is simply a placeholder carrying the value that represent that value. And to use SmartTag in WP Forms, you will pass the field ID. SmartTag will pull that value that a user has added to the selected or specific field in your form. So you will notice this is actually how the SmartTag looks like in WP Forms. So that is the field ID, then now you pass in this value, which is the ID. So to identify the specific field ID in WP Forms, this is actually our guide. You will simply go to the field option, click on general, you will see this value. So in our case, we want now to target the name field. So if you click on the name, come to general, you'll see it has the ID 1. So you can copy, then you say now field ID, and now we will target that. Then first, what this will do now, it makes it more dynamic for us. So I will preview that form. Then I'll say my key proton, then test at gmail.com, then submit. So you will notice it passed that value as passed. So there's an issue in how we've handled, we've missed something. Yes, we missed the equivalent operator because SmartTag must have this format. So in our case, if you are targeting the name field, what you're supposed to simply do is simply pass in this actually hit. What you'll simply is to add the pipe function, then you pass in the format, that is the field ID 1, or rather that is the first format. So that was the missing part. So I'm going to save this, close again. No, I'm not going to close that. I will reopen, then preview. It's field Mike proton test at gmail.com. As soon as we submit, there is a missing that test at gmail.com. So as soon as we submit, you will notice that the name Mike has been passed. So to do the second one, we will simply need to copy that, but I don't want to do. You can add that function, that sign symbol, then the ampersand, then question mark, WPF, the form ID 579, then the field ID is 1, and for this we're going to target the last. Then we will begin now the value, the field ID equivalent to, that is number 1. The value that we're targeting is the last right there. Then we're going to save it after we do that. So it should be my keep router. then test@gmail.com and do the submission. So if we do, you'll notice that this value is actually passed dynamic. So that is actually how to do. So if you'd want to target the email, you will simply add the ampersand operator, then that WPF 579. Then the ID we're targeting is 2, equivalent to what? In our case now, it is actually simple because you will simply pass in the smart tag, that is the field ID, equivalent to, and that is it. So Mike Proton, then submit. So as soon as you submit, this is what you'll notice. It actually prefill. And that is how to work now with the dynamic values in WP Forms and to prefill by URL. So what I would recommend, and then we recommend that you go through this guide that I will include on all different format that we have. For example, if you do one for the single text field, this is actually the format. If you do want the drop-down field, that is the format. If you want the multiple choice, that is the format. Checkboxes, everything. We have for all the fields right here. So you can play with it and let me know if you have any question. And this is actually our guide on how to work with the name or the address field. So already we've seen the name field. So to finish this video with, I'm going to do for the address field. So to simply do that, I will need to add the address field to the form. So this is the address field and this is the international format. I'll come back to this particular form. Let me go to my form builder, go to all the forms, then user details form. And now we're going to search for the address. The ID for address is ID number 4. And the ID for address, let me just come to this side, is ID number 3. So let me close this. So you'll see how the address field value is actually passed. You pass address number 2, that and that and that and that. So to simply put is this. I'll come to this, then I'm going to delete everything. But again, we are going to target only the address field. So the ID is number 3. The subfield value, we want now to begin with the address field number 1. This way. So you can simply copy this format. Then let me just copy that. Then I'm going to make sure this is 579. The ID was number 4 for that, but for yes, the ID is number 3. All right. As soon as you save it, so I'm going to fill in the value of address number 1 only. So you will notice this. And that is actually how to work with the address field. So see you next. I will be walking us through all you need to know about smart tag in WP Forms. Thank you.